Good morning and welcome. My name is Stephanie Engelstein, and I'm the director of the Life Sciences and Society program. I'm so thrilled to see so many people here this morning for this event, especially on a day as nice as the day that we have out there today. This is the 8th annual Life Sciences and Society Symposium, Food Sense, and I'd also like to welcome those of you who are here every Saturday morning regularly for Saturday Morning Science, which is a really incredible event, and we are so pleased to team up with them this year. For those of you who are coming to the symposium for the first time, I want to let you know that we do not always talk about food. Our topic changes every year, but we are always interested in a topic that focuses on the way that science and culture interact and are joined together. And also a topic that benefits from being looked at from a number of different perspectives or backgrounds simultaneously. We actually are always looking for input about new topics. We do have a topic already, a vague topic at least for next year, but if you think of a topic that you think would make a great symposium of this sort and you would like to help us organize it for a future year, please do let us know at lssp@missouri.edu. This year you may have noticed that our logo for the symposium is a wheel of chance. We talk about food choices in the context of health, but as we will hear this weekend and have started to hear from our keynote address by Brian Wansink, so much of our eating depends on elements like convenience, upbringing, cultural surroundings, and innate preferences. So this is really chance molding choice. We will hear about the way taste itself responds to expectations and contexts. Food is central not only to sustaining our lives, but also to the communities that we live in and giving us a sense of identity. So the Food Sense Symposium will try to bridge this divide between consumption and significance, helping us to make sense of our senses. I'd like to ask my co-chair for this event, Sarah Gable, to stand up. She's in the Department of Nutrition and Exercise Physiology and works on childcare and also childhood eating issues, overweight issues, and you'll see her, of course, throughout the weekend. And I'd like the planning committee to stand up. I had a wonderful time planning this event with an incredible committee. Sarah Gable, but also all the other members of the committee. If you could stand up too. Nina Furstenau, David Goldstein, Ingolf Grun, Mary Hendrickson, Julie Kapp. I don't see people standing. Carol Lazaro-Weiss, Mark Linnett, Jill Lucht, Luann Roth, John Stummel, Peter Stiepelman, Randy Westgren, and Matt Will. And I'll tell you, I've worked with a lot of committees, and this one has just been such a pleasure to work with, people who are really engaged in creating this event. I also want to thank our sponsors and partners. We can't bring an event of this sort to campus without really a great deal of resources. And so it's wonderful that we have such support from the university at large and from the community. People who think this is a good effort, who support our effort to bring the community into dialogue with what's going on at the university. I'd like in particular to thank Mizzou Advantage, the Department of Nutrition and Exercise Physiology, the Office of Research, the schools and colleges of medicine, journalism, agriculture, food and natural resources, arts and science, law, human environmental sciences, and also many of you who actually have made individual donations. Thank you very much for that. There is still a chance to make a donation. You'll notice my invaluable student assistant in the foyer during breaks, Lindsay Lutz. She has envelopes in the foyer, and if you feel inspired to give us $5 or $500, that will help us with our ongoing events, and we do have a way to get a tax deductible receipt to you. The LSSP is also part of the Life Sciences Center, and I want to thank its director, Jack Schultz, and the Life Sciences Center's staff in particular, who have been just incredible in making this happen, making travel arrangements, arrangements for food, putting together the logo that I already mentioned. So in particular, I'd like to mention Carla Carter, Jeffrey Reeves, Lindsay Lutz, and Ginny Booker. There are a number of events affiliated with this one around the same topic, around the topic of food. Many of those have already taken place, and we feel very lucky to work with such wonderful partners. 2 of them are still ongoing, and I highly recommend them. If you have a chance, please don't miss the Ellis Library exhibit on food revolutions over the last 2 centuries, and the art exhibit at PS Gallery on food, fact, and fiction. And finally, I want to welcome the people without whom there would be no event, namely the speakers who have come here from various parts of the country to share their perspectives with us. So let's thank all of the speakers. Now, also to say a few words of welcome is Rob Duncan, our Vice Chancellor for Research, whose enthusiasm for new knowledge is really inspiring and contagious.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Stephanie and Sarah, for your leadership role in this wonderful event. It's so exciting to be here at 10:30 on a Saturday morning and to see such a wonderful crowd. And I mean, people who come for this event, Food Sense, also people who often routinely come for Saturday morning science. Welcome, and it's just wonderful to have you here. I think that this is one of the most exciting themes we could possibly feature for many reasons. First of all, the issue of consumption and our food choices, Food Sense, really is critical to our sense of personal well-being, and that then extends to our sense of well-being as a society. We're certainly at a time where obesity has become an epidemic concern, especially in the southeastern part of the United States. We've just joined the Southeastern Conference. And I just came back from a meeting of the chief research officers of the major universities across the Southeast. In fact, in February 2014, we're planning, probably in Atlanta, to have a big international conference on mitigating obesity. And in fact, I'd recommended we call it Southeast Universities for the Mitigation of Obesity, or SUMO, you know, since we're all wrestling with this topic today. But seriously, I think this is really interesting because if I were to say what one theme unifies research across this campus more effectively than anything else, it's food science in all its forms. Everything related to the basic genetics of fat consuming versus fat storing. You can see this epigenetic shift in certain animals in microarray analysis. I mean, from the basic genetics through to more of the social implications of food and how we eat. This is a fascinating area of science that unifies us throughout. So as we embark on this, I think, wonderful set of speakers who have come here today, I encourage you all to engage very closely. As Stephanie said, if people have ideas and future topics too for us, we'd be delighted to have a close dialogue, and I'm really impressed by the organization that this Science and Society series has had through the years. It's really outstanding. This is the 8th year. Well, with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to welcome Professor Glenn Cameron, who's the Maxine Wilson Gregory Chair in Journalism Research and co-director and scientific advisor of the Health Communications Research Center here at the University of Missouri. Glenn.
Well, I have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker this morning, a fascinating and delightful woman, Shirley Corriher. I'll just read a couple of quick things about her background in case you didn't get a chance to do that. Shirley has a BA in chemistry from Vanderbilt University, where she was also a biochemist at the medical school. She has problem-solved food questions and issues for everyone from Julia Child to Procter & Gamble and Pillsbury, drawing on her scientific background as well as her many life experiences, none more notable than her founding a private boys' school where she fed 140 boys 3 meals a day for years. So talk about a problem. She has taught and lectured throughout the world. Shirley has long been a writer, authoring a regular syndicated column in the Los Angeles Times Syndicate's Great Chefs series, as well as technical articles in the Journal of Biological Chemistry. Her first book, Cookwise, The Hows and Whys of Successful Cooking, is a bestseller and won a James Beard Award for Excellence. Cookwise shows how scientific insights can be applied to traditional cooking, while her second major book, Bakewise, applies the same idea to baking. Shirley has received many awards, including the Best Cooking Teacher of the Year and Bon Appetit's Best of the Best Annual Food and Entertaining Awards in 2001. She has made a number of appearances as a food consultant on Aaron Brown's show Good Eats and has released a DVD, Shirley O. Corriher's Kitchen Secrets Revealed. She lives in Atlanta with her husband, Arch. Please welcome Shirley Corriher.
Thank you for getting up on a Saturday morning. I really, really appreciate your being here. I'm wired, so I think you can hear me in the back. But if you can't, wave your arms or do something frantic. Anyhow, we had a wonderful speaker last night on mindless eating. I felt like I was the poster child for it. But he pointed out that in the food lunchrooms, they sold tremendously more fresh fruit if they put it in a pretty bowl instead of the stainless steel tray. And I know at home, many of us have a pretty bowl for fruit. And you can have this gorgeous bowl, some pedestal bowl, really fancy, and have your apples and oranges and everything. And then the bananas, they just naturally drape across the top so elegantly. And you put those bananas across, and they're just perfect. They're absolutely perfect. And the next morning, they're covered in brown spots. What happened? What happened? I mean, they were perfect just a few hours ago. Gas is coming off of your apples, ethylene gas, and it's making your poor bananas ripen super fast. Alas, a friend of mine in Tempe, Arizona says, Shirley, I came home and there was a banana in the dining room. And I walked on through and there was a banana in the entry hall. And I walked on and there was another banana in the den and a banana on the kitchen counter. And I yelled, Jim, what are the bananas doing all over the house? And he said, Shirley Corriher said I needed to keep them separate because they were giving off ethylene and making each other ripen fast. So you don't really need to spread your fruit around the house, but you can bear in mind, and I know many places, B&Bs, that have a basket of apples out and have these overripe bananas draped on top of the apples. And I tell them, look, you'll have a lot less loss on your bananas if you just get a second basket and move it over here just a little distance from the apples, and that will help. Now, you can use this too. What about those avocados that you want to ripen? Aha! Put them in a brown paper bag, throw in a couple of apples, and loosely seal it. You don't want to cut off the supply. You just want to limit it. And so, anyhow, another thing that Glenn talked about, sometimes reluctantly last night, was kale. We had kale after kale questions. Anyhow, let me just give you a little bit about green vegetables. There are two forms of chlorophyll. This beautiful bright green and yucky army drab. And I was saying this once in Alaska, and my husband punched me. He said, Shirley, there's an Army general right over there. So I said, oops, you know. But the difference in beautiful bright green and yucky army drab in your green beans and broccoli and green vegetables is acid. And people say, well, I didn't put any acid in my green beans, but there they were, yucky army drab. The acid is coming out of the green beans themselves. When you plunge that happy little green bean in boiling water, you know, he's so happy taking in carbon dioxide and oxygen and giving off carbon dioxide just like we are. And you plunge it in boiling water, and the first thing that happens is a little cell wall cooks and shrinks and starts gushing out acids, this acid insides. And then the next thing that happens is the glue between the cells changes to water-soluble pectin and dissolves. So the cells are leaking and falling apart. It's just mass death and destruction. Now, I can make a vegetarian's day if I work at it. But it's no wonder that fruits and vegetables soften when we cook them. But the magic on preventing the acid is a short cooking time, because the longer you expose those, more cells are popping open and leaking and gushing out their little insides. Julia Child called me. She used to call frequently. She was a friend, a treasured friend. She said, "Shirley, I had these baby spinach leaves, and they were so tiny and so delicate, I didn't want to do much to them. So I just barely sauteed them, and I tasted in butter, and I tasted them, and they were wonderful. So I added a little cream." You know, of course, Judy would add a little cream. And I left them on while I was doing other things. But I came back, and they were bitter. What happened? And I had to explain, "Oh, Julia, mass death and destruction." yeah, you know. I said, and see, Julia was always thinking, and she said, "Do I have to blanch the spinach like the classic French before I saute?" And I said, "Well, you could do that. And you know, if you've ever noticed frozen vegetables, they stay bright green, and you can overcook them a little bit. That's because they were blanched. They were plunged in boiling water, and a lot of their acids went out already. And then they were flash frozen, and so they are more forgiving." I said, "You could do that, Julia, or if you had just taken the spinach off when you first tasted it, or added a little cream and heated it a minute and then taken it off, but don't leave it on the heat." And so she pondered that. And I ran into Stephanie, her assistant, a month later, and she said, "Shirley, I had to eat spinach every day for a week while Julia played with how long she could cook it before it got bitter." So anyhow, short cooking time. Now, 7 minutes is perfect for green beans. And now, actually, it's 10 minutes that they turn yucky army drab. But I tell everybody 7 because it takes them a while to get them off the heat and under running water and stop the cooking. And see, what you can do is pre-cook things and then just barely warm them in a little butter with sliced almonds would be nice, whatever, when you're ready to eat. So my stepson, he volunteered me to cook for the Glee Club, a 3-course dinner for 60 people. And I said, "Why do you always do this to me?" He said, "Well, some other mother's bringing the brownies." Shoot, I would love to bring the brownies. Now, I'm going to tell you my dirty story. It's not too dirty. It's going to be all right. This is the asparagus pea episode. And now, John Ash wrote an article in the syndicated column, John wrote one week, Ann Willen from Laverin wrote one week, I wrote one week, and Steve Reichlin, the grilling man, wrote one week. So John wrote that if you dry roast asparagus, which is my absolute favorite way to cook asparagus in the world, you take asparagus and hold the fluffy end and the back and bend, and it snaps where it's tender. Put it out on a baking sheet, drizzle a little oil. Don't get carried away. I had a great oil and put too much and had flames in the oven. It was pretty thrilling. So, a couple of tablespoons will do, not half a cup. Roll the asparagus around. Put it under the broiler. 4 minutes flat. And they're absolute perfection. They're this beautiful, beautiful bright green. And you pull it out, and I like to sprinkle a little bit of sea salt and a pinch of sugar. Now, what's with the sugar? Sugar helps fruits and vegetables preserve their shape. You remember back there when that poor green bean was cooking? And the second thing that happened was the glue between the cells dissolved. Sugar prevents that from happening. And let me give you a nice clean-cut case. Dried beans. You cook dried beans so long and they're mush. Those same dried beans, you add brown sugar and molasses, you can cook them for weeks. They're Boston baked beans. They hold their shape because their glue doesn't fall apart. So anyhow, pinch of sugar after fruits and vegetables are cooked will help retain their shape nicely for you. Okay, and if you want lemon asparagus, never, ever, 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 ever lemon juice. Remember, acid, 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 yucky, army drab in a few minutes. So what you do, you grate a little lemon peel. They've got these wonderful woodworking microplane zesters that you hold your lemon up, and as if you're playing the violin, you swoop the zester across, and it gives you just the right depth, and you can sprinkle it down there. Now, I left you in the middle of the asparagus pea story. So I tell my husband, honey, rush to Medline. We've got to have the straight scoop on this. I'm going to get call after call. So there are dozens and dozens of articles on asparagus pea in the medical database. You would think medical doctors would have something better to do, than investigate stinky pea. But what happens is, it is not the pea-er. We all have asparagus pea, the stinky compound. It is the smelly, not the pea-er, but the smelly. Some people have a gene that enables them to smell metabolic byproducts of asparagus in the urine. Other people don't have the gene. So some people smell it, and some people don't. And this is wonderful, in a big audience, you look at, and the people who have the gene have a sort of oh pew look. And the people who don't have the gene is, what is she talking about? And if my husband's along, he'll embarrass me by taking a survey, And it's about 50-50, interestingly enough. Anyhow, now you've got a perfectly good asparagus recipe, and you know all about vegetable cookery. And let me just whiz through some of the red compounds in vegetable cookery. If you've ever been standing there sauteing red cabbage, and you're totally innocent, you have not done a thing. You're just standing there, and this stuff turns the most disgusting blue you've ever seen. These compounds are called anthocyanins, and they have to stay acidic to stay red. So all you have to do is take that bright yellow lemon, squeeze a little lemon juice, and your cabbage is bright red again. And if you notice red cabbage recipes, a lot of times they'll have an apple chipped up in them. And this is so that the apple will give off acid to keep the red cabbage red. This compound is everywhere. It's in cherry muffins. You may have had a cherry muffin with a blue halo. That batter used baking soda and was probably alkaline. If you switch to baking powder and maybe buttermilk instead of milk so the batter will be acidic, you'll get rid of the blue halos. It's underneath the skin of walnuts, these anthocyanin compounds. So a blue cast in walnut bread is just charming. But if you've got a walnut topping on snow white fish fillets, blue drool is not good. So you can prevent this simply by roasting the nuts 30 minutes at 350, and this compound changes to one that won't change colors. Now, let me talk about proteins for a few minutes. Proteins, when you're cooking, they stick. I mean, they stick terribly, just terribly. When we started the boys' school, we grew very, very fast. We started with 2 boys who had been kicked out of every school, not only in the U.S., but overseas, too. And I just loved them, Jim and Art. And this was in the 50s, and there were no non-stick pans. All you had was a big, heavy aluminum frying pan. And I would stand there almost with tears in my eyes. You know, I was so terrified. And I didn't know how to cook, for heaven's sakes. I was a chemist. So I'd crack these eggs in the pan, a whole dozen. And then I'd get my wide spatula, I'd get ready, and then I'd put it on the heat, and I'd scrape. And I had the most gosh-awful, stuck-up mess, little knots you ever saw. Well, see, I'd put liquid protein in the pan. It'd run into every nook and cranny, and then I heated it to cook it into the pan. And I mean, those eggs were cooked into the pan. Thank heavens, after a couple of weeks, my German mother-in-law came to visit and taught me to heat the empty pan first, so there's a hot surface for the food to cook on. And now, the other secret, she would heat that pan and put a little butter and oil and tilt it around, and then she'd put the eggs in, and then she wouldn't touch it. And I would go crazy. I just knew they were burning, but she wouldn't touch it. And finally, she would scoop over, and the ones that were cooked piled up, and the juice ran down. And she had the biggest, fluffiest. She could make 4 eggs look like a dozen, you know. And now, in terms of meat, let me just, here you are, just starting out, and you're cooking 2 chicken fillets for dinner, okay? So you heat the empty pan. You've gotten past that. You know to do that. And you put a little oil in and tilt it around. And you plop your raw chicken breast down in the pan. They are stuck. I mean, they are really, really stuck. And this is a Zen moment. You have to be at peace with the universe. Think happy thoughts. Have a sip of Zinfandel. Whatever it takes. Don't touch the chicken. The chicken is stuck. It is stuck. Now, after 90 full seconds, which is forever and ever and ever, those proteins have coagulated, joined together on the surface of the chicken breast and lightly browned, and they just released all by themselves. And all you have to do is slip the spatula under and flip them over. And then when that second raw side comes down, you've got another Zen moment that you have to wait 90 full seconds. Now, you put these chicken breasts out when they have browned lightly on both sides. Put them out on the platter, and they'll finish cooking through from their heat. And you want to make a nice sauce. I mean, we may as well have fine dining here. We've got these gorgeous asparagus, so let's have perfect chicken to go with them. If you want to do a classic French dish, you might throw some thyme, fresh thyme or dried thyme in, and a bay leaf. And you want to put in a half a cup of liquid. Now, this could be water, or it could be white wine. It could be white wine and chicken stock. And I usually love white wine and chicken stock and put it in. Boil it down, boil it down, boil it down, boil it down. And when there's just a tiny bit left, you want to add about 1/3 of a cup of cream. And now, this gives you, and boil it until it thickens. And now you take your chicken breasts, cut them on an angle so they look very elegant, and drizzle this sauce over, and you have a high cuisine sauce. Now, you be careful to throw away the bay leaf. I know I was teaching for Ann Wright in Wrightsville, North Carolina, and her husband was Wright of Wrightsville Beach, and he was the sweetest man. And anyhow, they had this urgent notice that her sister, who had been on one of those tours where you get up in the treetops with the monkeys, had to be flown to Nairobi, and they had operated on her, and she had a tumor as large as a grapefruit. But the next day, it wasn't a tumor at all. It was a bay leaf. The bay leaf had outgassed, giving off gases, and created this thing. So get the bay leaf out. We don't want you to have to be flown to Nairobi for surgery, okay? Now, you don't want a sauce with cream? Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. How about doing salmon fillets instead of fish fillets? So, and again, salmon fillets, anything under about a 1/2 inch thick. Plop it in the pan, your Zen moment, 90 full seconds, flip it over, 90 full seconds again. And now, I think the most wonderful sauce for salmon is apple juice. And I put a 1/2 cup of apple juice in, boil it down, and put several tablespoons of grainy mustard, the one with the brown seeds in it. And you can put some fresh dill if you want. And you put this on top, boil this down and boil it down until it's thick, and spread that on salmon fillets. It's just wonderful. So you can have wonderful recipes in just a few minutes with pork chops, whatever, and think your Zen moments through, and then boil down some liquid, and you'll have a great sauce for them. Let me see. I haven't shown you how proteins cook. Picture proteins. It's a wad of ribbon here with little bonds across the coil. So here's one raw natural protein up here, And here's one down here, wad of ribbon with little bonds holding it in a wad. Here's one over here, here's one over here. They're way apart, and there's plenty of room for light to go between. But you look at that egg in the frying pan, you can see right through the egg white because there's plenty of room for light to go between those raw, natural proteins. Think how glassy looking raw chicken, raw fish, raw shrimp, because light can come through. Then you heat this raw natural protein, or you can even put acid on it, or some proteins are so delicate, just air makes the wad of ribbon pop open. And then part of it is floating along with its little bond sticking out. And almost immediately it bumps into another protein that has popped open with its little bond sticking out. And they bind together. And now there's no longer room for light to go between. So that egg white in the frying pan became solid white. And your chicken, your fish, your shrimp went from glassy looking to solid white. And the secret is to not overcook these proteins. Because what happens if you overcook, these bonds tighten up and tighten up and tighten up, and they tighten and tighten and squeeze out all the moisture. And your shrimp or chicken becomes absolute leather, and you need a steak knife to even make a dent in it. So your real secret on the protein cookery is not overcooking. Do we need to, when do we need, can we ask a few questions or what? Okay. We'll be there in a minute, gang. Don't worry.
We're going to open up to question and answer now, and we ask that you please use the microphones. So if you have a question for Shirley, please just stand up and go toward the microphone.
Okay, we've got someone here.
Yeah, as a professor of biochemistry, it's wonderful to see a member of the profession doing something worthwhile. Thank you very much.
You know, my biochemist buddies asked me where I went wrong. And I said, what do you mean went wrong? They take me out to dinner, the chef comes out. But thank you.
And I've been practicing my mantra left over from the 60s for 90 seconds. But the question I have is about stir-frying a chicken breast, which, of course, you don't let sit for 90 seconds. What
Right.
happens?
Right. You're doing, but the pieces are very small.
Right.
And so they are, and now, so interesting you should ask. That chicken breast, you had probably tossed it with minced ginger and maybe even an egg white and soy before you stir-fried it. It just so happens, everybody knows you can't put raw pineapple in Jell-O, it won't set. But people don't know that ginger has a single enzyme that tears down both collagen and muscle fiber. It's a major tenderizer. So you have been really busy with chemistry there in your stir-fry. And you probably stir-fried your vegetables first, and then stir-fried the meat and threw the vegetables back in. A lot of recipes go that way. And that's because they know that chicken's going to stick. And it's not going to stick badly because that wok is fiery hot. So that's going to be a big help to cook the surfaces. See, when you got those unwound proteins with their little bonds sticking out there, you got sticking. But the minute it gets done and they coagulate, hooked together, it's no longer sticking. So the hot wok is your secret, and the small pieces is your secret.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
So I'm a baker at a coffee shop, and I make these scones that have espresso in them, and I wanted to know how the caffeine survives the baking process in that. Would they still be like caffeinated scones at the end, or
Now,
does
let
it break
me
down?
make sure I
Sorry.
You're a
I'm-
baker.
I'm a baker at a coffee shop. One of the things we make are espresso scones. Right. Espresso scones. Sorry, I can't tell if I'm in it or not. So I was curious whether the scones, after they bake at, 325 for 20 minutes, if they end up being still caffeinated at the end, or if the caffeine breaks down while they bake.
Oh, okay. This is a question about breaking down of ingredients with cooking. And see, I get this question with wine all the time. And the answer is no, you never get rid of every trace of wine, because wine and water form this azeotropic mixture that doesn't separate out. So you can never get rid of every tiny trace. You get rid of, 90, whatever, most of it. But with the caffeine, I don't think you get rid of it at all. But, all the things in the news, you may or may not have noticed, but chocolate is good for you these days. Coffee is good for you. You are tremendously less likely to be diabetic if you drink coffee, several cups of coffee a day. Now, and this makes sense. You know how we've said, eat your fruits and vegetables. Well, what do you think coffee is? Comes from the coffee, bean. It's a bean. It's a part of a plant. It's our fruits and vegetables. What do you think chocolate is? It's fruits and vegetables. Yeah. So I don't think I would panic about a little caffeine. And now, if you want to keep your scones moister, don't put an egg in them. Even the British are not putting eggs in scones these days. Eggs dry things out terribly. And use a wetter dough, and you'll get a much moister scone.
Thank you.
Everybody go to our bakery. Okay, it's right down the street.
All this is wonderful.
Center.
I wonder if you could say a word about cooking your chicken breast with onions or garlic.
Oh, okay. I adore onions and garlic and shallots. What I would do is go through the Zen moment procedure with the chicken breast, and then maybe add just a tiny bit more oil or butter, and add my onions first because they take longer to cook, and saute them a little. Our chicken breasts are cooking through over here. And then I would add the garlic. And then you could add the chicken breast back to reheat if you needed to. And I would probably just add a little chicken stock and boil it down to make an onion and garlic sauce to go on. Yeah.
So I had two questions about blanching. So the 7 minutes for green beans, right?
7 minutes for green beans, 5 minutes. Now it's not all the same for all things.
That was my other question. Is there a listing of these different times for these different things?
Yeah, very, very much so. 5 minutes.
And is it in your book?
Yeah, it's in the book.
Okay.
It's in the book. 5 minutes for stinky stuff, like broccoli and cabbage. Now, see, these things don't get tender in that time. So cabbage, you got to shred super, super fine, like deli slaw. But if you cook it for 5 minutes, boil it in salted water, And again, things get tenderer faster in slightly salted water, and then drain them, and you can even rinse them, and then you reheat that cabbage in a little bit of cream. And it is, or even better still, I like to use buttered crumbs. You know, melt some butter and put in some breadcrumbs, and then reheat those cabbage threads in there. Oh, they're heaven. They're sweet. They don't resemble cabbage at all. See, you get 50% more stinky hydrogen sulfide gas between 5 and 7 minutes of cooking. So you've got to cook these babies less than...
And just to make, but blanching is in water. It's
Yes.
not, you can't do it by steaming.
Traditionally you don't, but you can blanch in milk.
Okay.
You can blanch in other liquids.
Okay.
But typically it's, and I don't, honest to goodness, I'm just...
And you start your timer for your 7 or 5 minutes when you put them in already boiling hot water.
Yeah,
Okay.
always. Because if you put them in and bring it to a boil, you lose huge amounts of vitamin C.
Very good.
In that warm-up period. It has to be absolutely full boil. Yes, yes.
I know it's possible to make edible whole wheat bread, but I haven't been able to do it. You got any tips?
Okay, one secret is going to be a wet dough. See, you get that dough dry so it's easy to knead, forget it. It's going to be dry. And actually, you don't even need to knead bread. You know, they've been the hot thing about 10 years ago, no knead bread. But Dr. Carl Hosny, one of the top starch people, told me, I guess 40 years ago, you don't need to knead bread. Because think what kneading is. You've got what makes, the way bread works, these springy, elastic sheets of gluten, whenever the cook adds liquid to flour and stirs, there are two little proteins, glutenin and gliadin, and they grab water and each other and make these springy, elastic sheets of gluten. Now, these elastic sheets are what yeast oozes out a liquid. And the minute that liquid hits a bubble in the dough, it's like blowing up bubble gum. It puffs it up. And this springy stuff just stretches beautifully and expands, and your bread gets lighter and lighter and rises. So the first thing I would do is make sure that the dough, don't start with anything but plain white bread until you get your feet on the ground. And, use bread flour, so you've got a good chance at success here. The ideal flour is hard red winter wheat. This supposedly King Arthur all-purpose is this flour. So use, if you can get King Arthur all-purpose, or if you can get a flour that says it's hard red winter wheat. Most bakers want spring wheat. We want tons of protein. But this hard red winter wheat has a lot of xanthine compounds that are incredibly flavorful. And if you don't over-knead them, they will survive the kneading, and your bread will be much more flavorful. But now, when you mix that dough up, make sure it's really wet, it's sticky, it's gooey, okay? And let it rise. When it rises, it's going to knead perfectly, because one protein molecule slides next to the other and cross-links and slides and cross-links. And then what you want to do when you, quote, punch it down, you can do this by folding over if you want. You don't have to squish all the air out. What you're doing is breaking up clumps of yeast so that they're moved to new places, because yeast is dividing. It gets in a clump, and the guys in the middle don't get anything to eat. They don't get any oxygen, don't get any food. So what you're doing when you punch the dough down is you're breaking up these clumps so the yeast gets fresh food and oxygen. And then to shape it in a round first and let it sit on the counter about 20 minutes. And then shape it in whatever you want to shape it in. But that dough should be miserable to touch at first. And if it's driving you crazy, oil your hands or oil the counter. If it's sticky, it's going to have enough liquid in it to have some steam and some moisture. I think it'll make a huge difference in your breads. Question?
As a college student, I sort of have limited culinary equipment in my apartment, and I'm pretty sure my stove is about 10 years older than I am. And I was just sort of wondering if you have any tips or tricks for people who don't have access to really good kitchen equipment to still cooking really good food.
Okay. So you're cooking in a toaster oven and a hot plate.
Not quite that bad, but pretty much.
Very close, very close. Well, my stepson used to impress women and get dates by doing the fish fillet in a toaster oven. And he would just stir together some mayonnaise and Dijon mustard and a little bit of Parmesan cheese and spread it out on the fish fillet and bake it in the toaster oven. And so there are things you can do. And it puffs, it makes a souffle. You know, the egg and the mayonnaise puffs and gives you this gorgeous souffle topping. You can survive, but and I think you could even do the 4-minute asparagus, and you may have to up to 5. I don't know how good the broiler on the toaster oven is, but you know there are things out there. You there used to be some books about cooking in the dorm. Maybe some of those. And a crock pot. Oh, my heavens. I could never have made it. When my husband and I married, I had 5 teenagers, less than 3 years apart. And they were all the same size. And they all ate like horses. My daughters ran track, so they ate as much as the boys. And I don't think I would have lived if it hadn't been for the crock pot. I had to work every day standing on my feet demonstrating food processors. And I'd come home so dead I could hardly stand up. And if I didn't, the minute I got in the house, there was this luscious aroma. And it would either be that huge pile of pork chops and onions and potatoes that I piled in there with mushroom soup when I went flying out the door that morning. And now, all I had to do was come up with a vegetable, and I had all this mob fed. But anyhow, yes?
Hi. My question is about spices, actually. So if you use dried spices, do you put them in earlier? If they're fresh spices, do they release can you overcook them? When do you put the spices in, whether they're dried or fresh?
Okay. The important thing is to taste as you go along. And try not to put a little salt in early, but not much, because as things reduce down, the flavors become stronger. So the important thing is to taste. And now, dried spices, you will need about 1/3 less than fresh. So if you're putting in a teaspoon of fresh, you want to put in about 1/3 of a teaspoon of dried. But I would say you can stir some in, and you can stir them in both times. Oh, if you want to, but stir them in early enough to flavor the dish. But do taste as you go. And anyhow.
Hey, I was wondering if you had any tips about how to cook an omelet.
How to do an omelet?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the way I do omelets, I make them just like scrambled eggs. So I've got the oil and butter, and see, I was so desperately poor. Every time they came in the cooking school where I was working, see, I was divorced and had 3 children, 2 8 years old, 1 6 years old, and I would demonstrate anything. I don't care that it didn't work. I would demonstrate it anyhow. So for several weeks, I demonstrated omelets at Neiman Marcus. And the pan was not an omelet pan. But take a small skillet, get the empty skillet hot, and you've got to have everything ready to roll. You don't have time to fool around with this. Okay, empty skillet hot, put in your butter and a little oil, okay? And it's better if it's a non-stick pan initially to make your life easier, okay? Now, the eggs you've already got beaten, sitting there ready, pour the beaten eggs in, and now you've got a Zen moment. You have to wait an eternity while those proteins hook together on this bottom surface. And, do it just like you're scrambling eggs. Ease a little of the edge back and let the juice run around. And then it's all still juicy, but, beginning to dry. Put some cheese down the middle, and you want to fold one side over, and then you can shake your omelet over to the edge and flip it out onto the plate. You can do it.
Thank you.
Hi. So my New Year's resolution this year is to use my crock pot more often. So I was wondering, what's your favorite thing to cook in the crock pot?
What I used to do was, the plain old, heaven forbid, cream of mushroom, cream of chicken soup. And I would definitely put a good slug of Worcestershire and a pinch of sugar in. And, I had to do it with stacks of boneless chicken breast, and then I would just cook. My absolute favorite recipe in the world for a crock pot. This is a butt, and you guys have good pork. Get a pork butt, which is miserable meat now. It's got bone and gristle and fat, and it's on sale for 99 cents a pound sometimes. Anyhow, you put that butt in the crock pot. You douse it heavily with Lynn Parent's Worcestershire. Turn it over. Douse it heavily with Lynn Parent's Worcestershire. Take a handful of light brown sugar. Smush, technical term, smush a crust on. And now you want about a half a cup of liquid, but don't mess up the butt. Pour it down the side. A half a cup of apple juice down the side. Slap the lid on that baby and cook it all day or all night. Fritz Blanken, I forgot one, on low. One once, and but in about 8 or 10 hours it should be done. Now, vital ingredient, some salt. You want to skim the fat off, and you can do it ahead, put it in the fridge, and get every drop of fat off. But then you need to add at least a half a teaspoon of salt, or the dish doesn't taste right. And you try to lift the bone out, and it falls apart. This is fall apart, tender, slow roast pork. A young lady, when I was checking out of a hotel in Austin, said, are you the Shirley who gave the butt recipe on the radio? I said, yes, I'm the Shirley. I've had 3 marriage proposals from the butt.
These are our last 2 questions.
First of all, it's nice to see another Southern cook here. At my house, I'm the main cook. I come from the Beaufort Sea Island, so I know how to do soul food all the way. Except for I've never mastered desserts. As someone from Atlanta, Georgia, what's the secret to the perfect peach cobbler?
Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. Natalie Dupree has a great simple peach cobbler. I think if you, mainly, you just want some butter and sugar on the peaches, and you can put biscuits on top if you want to. And now let me tell you which biscuits to get. I consulted for Pillsbury. Now, don't even look at the cans, but in the freezer, they have frozen Southern style, or they call them buttermilk or Southern style. Get those and put them on top and bake them, and you'd have a pretty good cobbler with that way. But don't be afraid to put some sugar on the peaches.
I definitely won't be afraid.
Okay.
Okay, so in the beginning, you were talking a little bit about obesity. Do you have any healthy tips or alternatives that we could use in our everyday lives to eat healthier?
Okay, now, how to eat healthy.
Yeah, like any alternatives we could use in our cooking?
Well, let's take tips from our speaker last night. Set yourself up, have some apples sitting around instead of heading for those the pecan wheat crackers that I love so. You have to go past the apples to get to those crackers, and try to do, vegetables won't kill you. The 4-minute asparagus is delicious, and you can do it without killing yourself. So, anyhow, thank y'all. We really appreciate your being here.